Oftentimes people think about going to the cloud as a cost play. But the real play there is the company transformation that happens when people move to the cloud. The talent transformation that happens, like move towards a much more technology company talent, very much focus on engineering excellence, has a stronger builder culture, or move to the cloud engenders that. AI has been used at Capital One for the longest time, and we always have realized that high quality data that is well managed and well governed powers the ability to use the data and apply AI to it to solve challenging problems for our customers, drive a phenomenal customer experience. We have this very phenomenal approach where we have engineering and business sitting right next to each other, almost operating as a cross-functional team working together. There is no lines, hey, I'm the tech team, you're the business team, and we'll throw over the wall. That has been critical for us for our success.
Welcome to the new automation mindset where AI, automation, and integration come together. I'm your host, Marcus Zern, and as Chief Strategy Officer and part of the founding executive team at Workato, it is my mission to find these top innovators in AI, automation, and integration and share their journeys with all of you. This podcast is inspired by the Wall Street Journal best-selling book with the same title, written by Workato CEO Vijay Tella. If you would like a free copy of the book, be sure to listen for a special offer at the end of today's episode. Today's episode is really a special one. It's about technology parallels, and it's also about the power of cloud computing. So I have with me today Kamlesh Talreja, and Kamlesh is the CTO and SVP of Financial Services at Capital One. So I made this statement about parallels. So let me just quickly explain what I mean here. So on one hand, there's Workato. We started our journey in 2013, about 10 years back. We were the first cloud-native enterprise iPaaS in the market. And frankly, till today, when you look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant, in the Leaders Quadrant, we're still the only cloud-native serverless iPaaS. And we did pick AWS as our strategic partner to kind of build our product and fulfill this mission. And very importantly, one of the things we right from the beginning made clear that this wasn't just a lift and shift of a traditional integration platform. We have in the company decades of integration experience, but we really wanted to leverage the cloud native nature to do more, to innovate, to kind of innovate on the experience, on interacting with an integration and orchestration product. All right, so that's Workato. Now let's take a look at Capital One, where Kamlesh is from. First major US bank to go cloud native, 100% cloud native. Actually, the journey, interestingly enough, started, when I read this right, 2013, just like Workato. Capital One also picked AWS as their strategic partner for that journey. And then, also, just like Workato, Capital One did not want to just lift and shift what they had just from an on-premise data center into the cloud, but the idea, the impetus to going cloud native was really about innovation, about customer experience innovation, about leveraging data better, and just to be a really modern bank, or the most modern bank, period. So you can see the parallels I'm talking about. It's actually almost spooky, I would say. But so I'm very, very pleased, and I was looking forward to this conversation here with Kamlesh to really dig deeper into those parallels. So he's at Capital One right now, like I mentioned, but then he also had stints at Goldman Sachs, and then maybe most importantly, 15 years at Amazon. So maybe we can start there, Kamlesh. So tell us a little bit about your story at Amazon. And Amazon is obviously iconic, right? I mean, if we talk about the digital age, digital transformation, where we are today in the industry and in IT, I think it all started with Amazon. Amazon disrupted retail We all know about that. And then a couple years later, with AWS, it changed IT forever. Tell us a little bit about your story, how you perceived it, what you took away from Amazon, also for your job right now at Capital One.
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you for inviting me to this podcast. Super excited to be talking to you, and really excited about even your journey on Workato and what you guys have been doing there, and reading the book on automation mindset. It's like how some of those principles have applied to Workato, kind of changing the way enterprises think about automation and bringing that adaptability and anti-fragility aspects of things and the scale aspects of things. All through my life, especially all the companies, I've been very privileged and very lucky to work on some of the most iconic companies of all time, starting with Real Networks, which right off college, which kind of revolutionized the way audio and video streaming was happening on the internet in the dial-up days. That was so innovative for its time when I joined there. And then going on to Amazon, when I went in there and seeing the whole trend from like internet revolution, e-commerce, then seeing the cloud and the mobile revolutions, and where Amazon was able to take that and take the customer experience. I've been just privileged to be in those crossroads in many times. And then over the last couple of years, being in the fintech space. Definitely one of the big things is like, hey, when I started with Amazon, it's so interesting how things move, right? When I was moving out, one of the people who I worked for at Real was like, hey, why are you going to go work for a bookseller? And Real is a tech company. And you can see how Amazon has changed and what we were able to do there. My journey at AWS, though, started in 2016. But prior to that, 2005, I think, was where my journey in Amazon started, right? Across Amazon, where I worked on almost very much, and those are the days when Amazon was in huge growth and scale mode, land grab situations in many cases. So all the things that I worked on were 0 to 1 at many times. And everything that you guys mentioned in your book around the process mindset, the scale mindset, the growth mindset, applying those in like from process to think about the growth aspect, then how do you innovate at scale with it was critical in all of those roles. And we were it's phenomenal learning experience, right? When I started off figuring out how the retail experience should look like. My first big program initiative that I ran was the service that actually built the add to cart button that all of you now see, powering that basically. So that was a crossroads service where everything related from shipping speed to all the products that we have to various sellers that provide prices on those offers, everything showed up through that service. One of the first few services that Amazon actually built for internal use, and we'll talk about that later too, is like going from there to like the digital ecosystem, my first things around, and that's where I actually used the AWS cloud internally and actually in true cloud native fashion. Was at Amazon Instant Video, what now became Amazon Prime Video, where we were launching an HD solution and showed that, hey, every file that we were getting, which was SD first, and as you started getting more raw files from many of your content producers, the compute needs, the network needs, the storage needs were going up exponentially. And how do you do that in a non-cloud way was not possible at all. We would never have been able to make that launch happen at the time. So the first visibility or the first value out of the cloud was incredibly obvious at that time when we started using it. And it helped us launch in 2009 itself, our first big HD solution across all our devices. And you could see like, hey, there are companies that will adapt to the cloud, and then there are companies that will not adapt to the cloud. We were working with some ISVs which were very forward leaning and they helped us get there. Then others wouldn't. And then how do we fill in the blanks there? How do we bring in our own technology muscle there to build out something more differentiated? Over all these journeys, and then going on to AWS, right? AWS digital, and then AWS was all about the enterprise. Like that was a time, 2016-ish, when AWS became very focused on gaining enterprise market share, right? Originally, the whole Genesis of AWS was enabling startups, enabling somebody with a quick credit card come up and get infrastructure going. Enterprises brought in a very different set of requirements, very different set of go-to-market with them, as I'm sure the Workato folks you might be very clear about. So for companies that don't start there, it's a huge learning experience. And that was a fantastic journey. Is how do we do that? And how do we succeed in that? Talking about the journey and what has enabled me to come into fintech now, those three key learnings that I learned at Amazon. One was immense focus on understanding the unmet customer needs and how do you address that. There is this, always, that was first part. The first part there is like always this whole concept undifferentiated heavy lifting. That is very integral to the way we at Amazon AWS people think about this, right? It's like, hey, how do we take away much of the toil that every company has to go through, every developer has to go through? And how do we take that away and actually enable these customers, these developers to kind of build or actually do what they should be focused on, which is their core business value add. So that focus on the customer's need and how do we enable them, that was key to my learning. Amazon was big about it, AWS even bigger because and in the developer mindset. Second is that opportunity for innovation at scale, right? In the scale mindset, the abundance mindset, which you think about, and that brings up a huge opportunity for us to think through in a game-changing way, and how your in-house tech talent can actually enable you to do that. As we were thinking about, I talked about how we would do HD, the high definition video launches, right? We had a very good partner, Aspera, for example, and we used to use them to get in secure FTP, all the files from our content producers in Hollywood. And they were very lenient. So this was one partner who was super lenient. We said, hey, we have to go to the cloud. We are going to do mezzanine files, which will be 10x bigger sizes. And we need a much bigger throughput into Aspera servers. And we need unlimited scaling of storage, right? Because these files could be big. We don't want to stop. We don't want to rack and put extra storage. And they worked with us very well. And we were able to get this going where we had in our DMZ in the cloud, we had an Aspera server running. They were able to scale right to S3 directly, store those blobs there, worked very well. Then we had other partners around content encoding, etc., who were like, oh yeah, no, we only run on Windows, for example, and we don't have a cloud solution yet. So there we had to kind of step out and said, okay, how could we use an open source solution, FFmpeg or any of those orchestrator video encoding tools? And we built our own cloud encoding server there, or whole cluster there. So that tells you like that's where Amazon could bring its might to bear. And in many cases, it has helped us scale that business much faster because we don't have to just rely on what the market's current state is or what our partner's current state is. So that was the second part of it, which is that, hey, opportunity for innovation exists at scale when you think about the big stuff. The third piece, which is towards the latter half of my career, is like, hey, enterprise needs. Enterprise needs are very different. How do we scale to that? AWS Marketplace, when I started it, when I joined it, I was a leader of AWS Market. It was about a much smaller business focused on startups and individual developers who had a credit card. You can get a virtual machine image going, right away. You don't have to go search for it on the web. Much of it open source or free. And some cases you had virtual appliances, which were also for paid. Worked great for those folks, but may not work for enterprise customers who had a very different pricing model, very different procurement process, very different governance process around who can buy what. And understanding that, and how do you pivot AWS Marketplace, for example, to kind of address those enterprise needs and see where the company is going, right? AWS was growing gangbusters at that time. A lot of its focus was on enterprise. So how do you take the requirement? How do you build a product that adheres to those needs? So that's been a fantastic journey. Those three learnings have stood me in stead, and very much lines up with what at Capital One also we continue focus on, which is the customer needs and thinking strategically and thinking as a platform company in many cases.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, maybe it'll make you smile that, for an enterprise company like Workato, the marketplace that you built and that you managed and so on, and you expanded to the enterprise is really, really key for us as an enterprise B2B player. I mean, we've seen exponential growth through the private transactions on the AWS Marketplace. So it is definitely working. So thank you.
Oh, it's so great. So great to hear that. That is immense validation, because some of the that fact that we need to do the private pricing was critical to our enterprise story, and I'm so glad Workato is able to kind of leverage that.
No, it removes friction, and
Yes.
and so it's really, really helpful. So, this is fantastic. I mean, my God, what an experience! 15 years at Amazon, and it's such project that everyone knows about. So talk to me about Amazon and then Capital One. So I was wondering, kind of a little bit what maybe there's any differences. It's kind of funny. So and I've done this with other folks who were on the podcast. MIT Sloan has this culture study on large companies, and there's one for Amazon, there's one for Capital One. The interesting thing is they're actually not that different. I mean, the top two, the innovation and then the customer centricity, actually are top two, both at Amazon and at Capital One. Probably Amazon is a little stronger on the execution side, but I mean, if you kind of overlay them, it's not so much of a difference. Like, what's your perception? Like, what do you see? How's your world different at Capital One?
Marcus, you're extremely right. There's so much big similarities here, and the focus on the customer, the focus on long-term thinking, strategic thinking, and the focus on like driving innovation through strong in-house technology, and technology as an enabler and differentiator, not just enabler, but differentiator. That is a common sentiment. And I think that comes from the fact that both these companies were founder-led, or Capital One is still founder-led. Rich Fairbanks, our CEO, has founded the company, is still running it, and is extremely successful at in running it and making it the kind of company that it is. Jeff was running the company until 3 years back. So you can see founder-led companies have this strong ownership, high ownership about like, hey, how do we make things successfully? Think about your own business, right? And you guys at Workato, like, you guys have started the company. You can feel that, like, hey, this is what we want to make an impact, not just on how the business, but also how it becomes embedded in the way enterprises or the way people or way consumers operate. And that's the that's the core driving factor behind many of the similarities in Amazon and Capital One, and as you rightly mentioned. I think the major differences where it would come in was around the business model and where the two companies started their journeys, right? Financial services company, Capital One is now in the journey of becoming a technology company, right? A platform company. So that differences will also kind of obviate as we complete the journey or we continue on this journey. Capital One also being a financially regulated in a financial sector regulated industry, I think that has some differences in where compliance, risk governance is a key factor, is much more front and center for us. The focus there, and Capital One has been, I'm very impressed at the way they have been able to both shift left in terms of this governance compliance aspects, also run it at scale, and run it at a scale which achieves these two almost contradictory, but actually not really contradictory goals of like empowering teams to build the best customer experience, but at the same time giving them the guardrails of governance and all the compliance aspects. So you have those guardrails so teams can innovate, and at the same time you have top of house tech teams, risk teams, which are providing those guardrails in a much more automated fashion, in a much more strong mechanistic fashion. So this is not, people don't have to kind of go figure out everything from scratch every time, and every project doesn't have to kind of reinvent the wheel. So very impressed with how Capital One has done this in such a safe, regulated way. So that's one of the two key differences that I see. But I think many of these will, as Capital One continues on this platform tech journey, we see some of those going away too.
So if you were to summarize kind of like the benefits of going cloud native for Capital One, what they would be, and maybe you can help us actually make it real? I'm just thinking like stuff that you're working on right now. I think you shared a little bit about this Navigator that you've been working on. Maybe you can contrast. I don't know if you can even still imagine what that would be like if you built that on premise. I think there's been too many years in your career ever since. But what does being cloud native help you with your job right now?
Yeah, and you mentioned the start of this, right? Capital One has been on the cloud journey since 2013. I was actually watching this all from my seat at AWS. I was at the keynote that Rob Alexander, our CIO and my current manager, he presented along with Andy Jassy at AWS reInvent at the keynote, and it was pretty phenomenal that to see being the first financial services company to come out and say, hey, this is what we are going to do with the cloud. And I always felt this is like really cool. But then until I got into the fintech sector, I couldn't see, the awesomeness of that became visible after I left Amazon and AWS, where you go onto the customer side of things and see how complexity is there, or how much complexity is there from the customer experience side of things, the way any financial services company has to operate with governance, with the business model and margins that we have, and the kind of change in kind of the revenue structure that happens, right? For tech companies, it becomes incredibly easy to think long term because much of their revenue is over a longer term period. People sign 3 or 5 year contracts, and I'm not saying this happens, but a tech company can go to vacation for 6 months, but as long as they can keep the lights on and keep serving, most of these customers are embedded. They're able to use that service, and they would pay for it. Over time, that advantage may wither away from them if they don't innovate, but like they have some protection. Financial services companies are much more, much less protected from that moat in a way. So for them to be able to get into a very long-term journey to kind of get going and stick around with that 5-year journey, and by 2020 we had eliminated all our data centers. That is a huge achievement. Like that awesomeness of that was visible only after I left Amazon. And so the primary driver, right, for us, as you clearly pointed out, oftentimes people think about going to the cloud as a cost play. Hey, it'll be cheaper. At least in the early days of cloud, that was a big one. It's a cost play. It'll be cheaper for us. I don't have to, I don't have to have people who will rack servers, and I don't have to keep. It's an OpEx to CapEx to OpEx play. All of those fun stuff. And maybe that it is in many cases. But the real play there is the company transformation that happens when people move to the cloud. Right from the talent transformation that happens, like move towards a much more technology company talent that you would say, a talent that is very much focused on engineering excellence, has a stronger builder culture. The cloud or move to the cloud engenders that. And the follow-on effects of the high velocity and agility that you get out of it. It's not just about the infrastructure, but the way you start building it in some way. The fact that you have API-based infrastructure, you don't need to worry about it. The fact that you can have infrastructure as code, you can have clear visibility over all your resources, like just can free you up to really focus on building the software and deploying it and running it at any point of time. So that is a huge achievement. And the second thing is like the platform enhancements that it gets to. I don't think any company today can say, hey, we will be a platform company, we will do APIs, if they're not on the cloud. It will become extremely hard for them. Right? And that's what allows us to build innovative applications such as Auto Navigator, such as a Navigator platform. Because now it's just second nature for us to say, hey, we need to have a digital experience for our dealers, auto dealers, or for our consumers. And the digital experience is high availability, 3 nines, 4 nines, 5 nines in many cases, which many of the incumbent companies in that space, or even the folks they're coming to us because their existing applications can't scale right. it would be hard for them to move from they'll have to first complete the journey from on-prem to the cloud.
Yeah, no, I think we noticed the same. I think the velocity we can enhance our platform at Workato is just nothing like I had ever seen before. I was also doing software with the old on-premise model, very, very different. I mean, it's like day and night. Now, I want to address one topic also. We talked about all the good things about the cloud, the agility, the speed, kind of becoming a platform company, all of that. One thing that we were running in at Workato, I would say pretty much up until COVID. COVID changed a lot of that, I have to admit, is that people always said like, oh, you got a great product. And we were always among the last 2, 3. And then we were eliminated at the end because they said, oh, no, you have to run on premise because it's for the security. Right. It's, basically, all the goodness that you can get was basically wiped out by that one argument. Like, what would you tell people about if they still think today that on-prem is more secure than the cloud? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I have been on both sides of this earlier with AWS and now with Capital One. I would, in the strong belief we have and what I've seen, cloud today is in fact way more secure than any on-prem infrastructure we might have. You have cloud services such as AWS and Azure and Google now powering many of the military and intelligence operations of many countries, including the US. So you can't have more security than many of those highly sensitive workloads. And I know for a fact AWS, it is applying the same way they build regional data centers for the military, the same way they build it for the intelligence services. That's the same way they're building any of the data centers. So you're getting the same, because these hyperscalers, because these cloud providers are serving so many different customers, different workloads, right? From global banks, high sensitive workloads, military, they have been able to address all of the threat vectors that might exist that we will be aware of at a much faster, much more real scale with much more sophisticated solutions than we would be able to do on an on-prem infrastructure that we would be owned by us and limited to us in many cases. And just the shared security model where the infrastructure is totally protected and then we have to worry about our app stack on top of that is incredibly powerful. The other pieces, because these services, these cloud providers were built from an API mindset, from a service mindset, what that means is there is very good transparency of all the accounts, all the resources with resource tagging, etc. You can get full transparency of all your resources in play at any point of time. And with services such as AWS Config, for example, you can even set the right rules like, hey, who has access to what and what's your security perimeter and what can you do with it and not do with it. So if any company, and Capital One definitely does that, is if you have that whole cradle to grave, full process workflow around how you create accounts, how do you manage accounts, how do you manage these resources, and how do you get visibility, you're much more protected. You remember from old on-prem days, like the one thing that would be any CIO would be worried about is, oh yeah, I have some developer will have a rogue server sitting under their desk, or they will use some shadow IT, some service outside that will expose this data. All of that gets locked down. Of course, you have to implement it right, but it gets locked down if you do it the right way on the cloud.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can, obviously, we bet the company, Workato, on being cloud native. We picked AWS because back in 2013, there was just nobody who was as secure, as enterprise grade as AWS. That's a fact. And I can tell you today, I mean, it has, I think you're right. I mean, first of all, you do it right. And then I think you also, being in the cloud, focuses you, to your point, we know that as Workato, to really take care of situations that I would be surprised people building this on premise ever get to, like, double encryption and, like rotating your encryption keys every hour, all of those things. That's just not going to happen in an on-premise environment. So yeah, I mean, I think we both agree, and Capital One shows it, and Workato shows it. I mean, I would say we're definitely as secure as on-premise, and most likely actually much more secure out there. But you brought up that topic of APIs, like, with someone who's been 15 years at Amazon, and I think you joined not that much after Jeff Bezos made his famous mandate, right? You have to build an API or you get fired, which kind of changed software forever, I would say. I think also APIs and cloud almost like go hand in hand. It's almost like they belong together. They come as a pair in a way. Tell me a little bit. How was that for you when you were at AWS back then, and then maybe also what does it mean today at Capital One?
That is just a fantastic question. Like, you can draw almost a straight line through that from that memo from Jeff to AWS and what Amazon, the company, is today. I joined, that memo I think came out late 2002. I joined in early 2005. So I was in the middle of when the transition was happening. It took some years for that transition to fully complete. But also my team built some of the first services that were driven by that mission. So I owned this service called the Offer Service, which actually powered what I talked about, the buy box. And all the pages that you see today, the main detail page on Amazon, then the listing pages on Amazon where you see all the other, not just of one price, not the buy box price, but all the other prices. And then finally the buy box. So this service powered all of them. As you can imagine, right, most of the revenue flew through these services, through this one service. So very high traffic service. And the best part, like, you can see the innovation that it engendered. Now we could leverage, once the service, we built it out, which powered these three pages, for example. But the way we had built it with this clear abstraction, this clear API specification, when we launched our advertising product, for example, where we embedded Amazon links, that same service was being called to say, hey, which offer should I show, which price should I show to some other on publisher's website. So you can see the innovation that it engenders. That's where the service-oriented architecture and the API-based services were able to do. Take a look at what we did with Prime. Like with Prime, we had to change to say, hey, this will come to you in next 24 hours or next 3 days. Again, the Prime team didn't have to worry about figuring out which prices or which products were Prime enabled, etc. They could call this my API and get that, and they were very focused on the customer experience that they needed to do. Fast forward even to what we do with Fulfilled by Amazon, right? Which has now become the key infrastructure for all our third-party sellers. There, we didn't have to worry about, like, again, which offers were from XYZ, from Best Buy versus Amazon and others. They just called the service, and we were able to determine what was the best offer to show, and showed up there. So you can see the kind of innovation it engendered. That's what services, that's what APIs, that's where abstraction levels, loose coupling does to you. It allows your company to grow. And this was actually emphasized even more for me in later, after I'd even finished that particular part of my career at Amazon, but had gone on to other stuff. I was reading the book Losing the Signal. Losing Signal is all about BlackBerry and where it started and where it ended. And you could see like the biggest innovation, and I truly respect Jeff, like he's one of the most visionary business people of all time. So the fact that he was able to identify that he had a killer product, a product that he had built had great customer resonance, but he may not have the right platform underneath that to kind of solve that or help it grow, and that there is a chance that he would lose a lead or this would wither away if the platform didn't shape up or didn't enable him to achieve those goals. And that's what caused that memo, and that's what spurred that memo from him. And the fact that, as a founder, he was able to have the credibility and everybody aligned on the mission is led to what that happened. And we know there are so many examples of where the platform doesn't keep up with what the customer experiences should be, and you find that companies wither away. And that Amazon was able to actually grow was because of that memo in many cases. And that API mindset, right? That whole led to the next step of that is like, hey, our infrastructure at Amazon can also be APIs in a way, can be service based. How do we request servers and where people don't have to go set up tickets and say, hey, I need 50 servers, etc. And that led to this whole AWS idea, and AWS idea brought in from the service oriented architecture, infrastructure services, and the fact of APIs is so foundational to how AWS thinks about these things. So you can totally see the impact of it on the people, the impact of it in just industry in general, and impact on Amazon. Amazon wouldn't have been the company it is without that memo, for sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, look at the core. I mean, we always talk as ourselves as an orchestration or integration automation type company, but at the core, what Workato does, it orchestrates APIs. Just makes it low code. It's cloud native, but it's an orchestration of APIs. One great example, I think, where I saw that was MGM, which actually now is Amazon Studios.
Amazon Studios, yeah.
So they embarked on a big digital transformation, and then, basically they had lots of APIs. Just in their case, applications like Salesforce, maybe data stores like Snowflake. And then also, obviously, like media application, like more specialized application. But they were very, very intentional in picking cloud applications for that. And then they really found in Workato that kind of tool that orchestrates it all together, all these pieces, and actually lets. I think one of the amazing stories we had was that with a low-code tool like Workato, a Salesforce administrator could actually create their own service, like a watermarking service for video content, for example, and expose it as an API and then make it available for reuse again, that kind of stuff. So look, I think APIs is, again, if you decide to go in the cloud, I think you almost like there's no way not to go API. It goes hand in hand. All right, that's cool. Okay, so we're early 2024. We talked about APIs. We talked about cloud native. Obviously, the whole last year was all about Gen AI. Now, I read we talked about going cloud native for Capital One was not about lift and shift, not about just cost of the data center. I think, if I read this right, it was fundamentally about data and being able to leverage data for innovative customer experiences. And when you hear data, AI is like the next thing, right? It's kind of, how can you do smart things with data? And now we're yet another level, generative AI. How's that at Capital One today? What importance does data, AI, and so on play in the whole journey that you guys going through?
Yeah, this is the Capital One has probably, AI has been used at Capital One for the longest time in data, the value of data. Very early in our, even our establishment, the whole information-based strategies around how we do risk modeling, this has been key for us. And we always have realized that high quality data that is well managed and well governed, powers the ability to use the data and apply AI to it to drive huge, solve challenging problems for our customers, drive a phenomenal customer experience. And which again will drive better customer engagements with us, interactions with us, and that's a very good virtuous flywheel, right? Enables our ability to help our customers even more and improves their satisfaction with their customers. I think the Gen AI piece it doubles down on that. It shows a strategy that we chose to go onto the cloud for data and build enable a data marketplace within the company so that we have no silos in data being used to drive AI is exactly the spot on right thing. Gen AI will be many things, but folks who are able to leverage their data to build and train some of those models will drive a much better customer experience, will probably be better winners and better leveragers of the Gen AI capabilities. And I think we are very well set up for that. We have a strong team on the AI side, on the data side. Prem Natarajan, who's the chief AI scientist, he is again came from Amazon, so he's also driving a strong roadmap in many of the things that we are doing in these areas. For example, our ability to leverage real-time data at scale. Like, how do we build the streaming data products, and areas like fraud, where we can identify and mitigate suspicious activity right in time as the customer is swiping their credit card. So these are very innovative, high-scale systems that provides us a unique ability and provides a differentiator for our businesses to kind of serve the customer in the right way.
Yeah, it almost seems to me, we talked about how APIs go hand in hand with the cloud, but I think almost data and AI, it's almost the same. It feels like there was this digital transformation wave, or the digital wave. The AI wave isn't like a separate thing. It's almost like it goes on top, almost like it reinforces each other. Do you have, in things like this service, you talked about Auto Navigator, which by the way is, I watched a little video. It's really cool. It almost feels like, an Amazon UI for, getting your car financed in a way. It's one of those things where, getting your car financed at the auto dealer is just such a terrible experience. It's one of the last things where you feel like you're in the dark ages when you buy a new car. It's just atrocious. And it seems like you guys are doing the digital thing. And I imagine there's a lot of data and AI also involved in that product, huh?
Oh yeah, and we're incredibly excited about what Auto Navigator is doing. It's like building this digital marketplace between our dealers and our customers. And our customers love it because they are able to go in there and get the best inventory of cars out there and immediately get you're right. There's just this, there's this experience that customers like about buying cars. They love buying cars and the experience of it, but there are some aspects of the experience that they don't like. And that haggling, and as well as figuring out what they are, what they can borrow or not borrow, or what is their loan limit versus not. And going through that process is not what they like, but they love the experience of finding a car, driving a car, test driving a car, getting the car keys and driving off like that. So the whole idea behind Auto Navigator is, how do we emphasize the good aspects of your omni-channel car buying experience and make the, again, I'll go use my old term of undifferentiated heavy lifting, of figuring out the toil of figuring out what you're qualified for, what customers can be underwritten for, take that away. So our dealers don't have to do that. Our customers don't have to be troubled by that. And that's where we have built products for our dealers and Auto Navigator for our customers to kind of have this marketplace going. And customers can come to the Auto Navigator, they can find the car they want and get pre-qualified, get exactly the amount that they would be paying for that car, what they would be qualified for, and go to a dealer and get that car going right away and drive it off the lot. This is a very powerful experience, and we can see how customers are loving it. The NPS behind it is very high. Customers love the experience. Our dealers love the experience because it's high conversion for them. They are able to get the cars off the lot in the right way, and super exciting. And this is, again, data is incredibly important. The AI aspects is incredibly important. That is powering this. Our journey as a cloud company, our journey as a platform company is incredibly important, because you couldn't do it, as you said, right? We couldn't do it if you were still in on-prem. And if our services were not built as composable architecture, as micro front-end widgets, we wouldn't be able to do it in so many different ways. So this is like again, coming together of many of these trends, whether you say it's a cloud, the mobile, Auto Navigator is on the web and on the mobile, and you talk about data and AI, all of these trends coming together is is bringing this phenomenal product to our customers and to our auto dealer and to the vertical auto dealer ecosystem there.
No, that's great. Maybe last question here. So, we talked about the benefits of what's possible with cloud native computing and then APIs and AI on top of that. Now, the operating model to run this is different now with cloud native versus on-prem. I mean, if you look at, I think developers today with hyperscaler like Amazon, right, or like AWS, they can build something much, much faster. I think you need less, you basically, the infrastructure is taken care of if you want. I mean, even if you, now interesting, if you look at like a company like Salesforce, right? Salesforce in, over 20 years back decided that's the way to build their CRM application. And I think it created a whole ecosystem of these kind of Salesforce administrators, maybe a little less technical than developers, which if you take the previous generation like Siebel and so on, it just wouldn't have been possible. Simple as that. So there is somewhat of a democratization, decentralization aspect to the cloud that it's driving. I'm just curious, cultural shift at Capital One. How do you perceive that? How's that? What are the impacts there at Capital One?
Yeah, and there are 2 or 3 ways that this cultural shift. One is the talent transformation that has happened at Capital One. As you said, right? I mean, if we have to produce at the scale that you talked about, other companies in tech world are building, right? So Capital has been on the journey on talent transformation, right? Aligning, in many cases, our processes for this cloud native world. What is the tooling required for that? In like, for example, in my division, we think about these 3 things: system, structure, and staffing, right? So the staffing aspects, the talent transformation. Systems is the tooling aspects of our own. So in some ways, the cloud has made things easier for our developers. In some ways, it has made it harder. Now, suddenly, if you do not build it right, or if you do not have the right, most of your developers now have to worry about, hey, which security groups? So they have to become network experts. They have to become infrastructure experts, because they can no longer rely on some system administrator, network administrator to kind of say, hey, just give me one service or one rack and I'll go deploy to it. So they're getting exposed to all these abstraction layers, which they probably had never exposure to before. So how do you build cloud platform enablement tooling to kind of abstract that out? So your developers, there is a certain platform engineering team. So we have gone with the concept of platform engineering, where you have a platform engineering team that builds the right tooling, builds these app templates that others can come and use and get going right away. So many of these things are done automated way for them. So that's a key part of our transformation process, all the cloud tooling around it. Second is staffing. So again, the division that I'm part of, we have this very phenomenal approach where we have a business team, very much engineering and business sitting right next to each other. And that is almost operating as a cross-functional team working together. There is no lines, hey, I'm the tech team, you're the business team, and we'll throw over the wall. That has been critical for us for our success. We call it the experience model, where you have these business or customer experience focused teams, which own a customer, which own all the activities, the journey map around those customers, building that customer experience out, the results around it, the NPS around it, and they come back and improve all the time. So a combination of these structural approaches, the tooling that we did, and the staffing, it's how we are moving on this journey to even become truly a platform company, truly a technology company in the cloud in this sense.
Yeah, that's fascinating because, this was one of the core tenets of building Workato, really. So my background was actually years back. I was more on the functional side, more on the building like defining the requirements for business processes. And my observation was that kind of interface between IT and the business, back then when I did it, it was just a real problem. it was just not working. And I felt that anything that could be done to get that closer together, make that more seamless, would be a huge benefit. It's kind of funny, but the cloud native aspect, it doesn't seem like it's related to that, but because you don't need to worry about the infrastructure, right? That's taken care of. You can actually worry a lot more about now kind of collaborating with your business colleagues, right? And focusing more on the requirements, on the processes. It's almost like a burden is taking off your shoulders as a developer, and then more people can do it, and I think more innovation happens and so on. I think it's great to see that you're seeing that the same way. Listen, this was fascinating. I mean, I think I could ask you 20 more questions, but we were like 1 hour in here. So first of all, I want to thank you for taking the time. I think these parallels, almost a little spooky between Capital One and Workato, like, same year, same story, same strategic partner. I think a lot of what you're experiencing feels exactly like why we built Workato and why we felt that actually the world that we live in, iPaaS or integration, needs a truly cloud native platform. It's much more than just lift and shift, right? This isn't just, it's going to be cheaper. No, this unlocks so many things that just weren't possible before. So Kamlesh, thank you for your time, and hope to continue the conversation somehow going forward. Thank you.
That'd be great. Thank you. This is great. Thank you, Marcus. And I had a phenomenal conversation too. Really loved it.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you like what you heard, we do have a special offer for you. If you share this or any other episode of the podcast on LinkedIn with the hashtag TNAM for the new automation mindset, that's TNAM, our team will reach out to you and make sure you get a free hardcover copy of the book by our Workato CDO, Vijay Tella. Please make sure to rate today's episode, leave us a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the show so you will never miss an episode. I'll see you next time.